Have you ever felt like a fraud, despite clear evidence of your success? Well, this might be called imposter syndrome, and today we're going to talk about it. Hi, I'm Peter Buckle, and this is Design Office Hours, a podcast about design, designers, and careers in design. I talk about creating, leading, and navigating creative work at this place we call work. Whether you're a student, just starting out, or an established designer, welcome to this show. This show is, as usual, also about your input, so send in your topics and questions This show is also about your input, so send in your topics and questions as usual. How to get in touch with me? Email designofficehours@peterbuckle.com and follow me on Instagram at designofficehours. Last but not least, head over to peterbuckle.com/designofficehours to sign up for my mailing list and to get notified about new episodes and other stuff. What do we have on the menu today? We will talk about imposter syndrome. This is not just one question that has reached me. This has reached me a couple of times. And this is somewhat prevalent in the creative community, or at least I see it more often in creative people, or maybe I just witness it more often. So what is imposter syndrome? Let's start there a little bit. Well, a common psychological pattern where people doubt their accomplishments. It sounds very cryptic, but it's exactly how I started this. You feel like a fraud, or you think you don't belong here, despite there actually being a clear evidence of your success. Also, it is called syndrome, and it's actually not a mental illness. Let's not get confused and concerned here. But it is a cognitive distortion that, again, many people, and I think many creative people, experience. What it feels like? Well, you may downplay your achievements, thinking it's luck or timing, or certainly not your talent that got you here or made you successful in that moment. Your fear of being found out and seen as not good enough. You dismiss praise and focus on criticism. And you feel anxious, inadequate, or like you don't belong. Who experiences it? I think not just high achievers. This can affect anyone. And I think it's common in people from marginalized groups or high-pressure environments. Think about modern jobs. They're often high-pressure environments. Why it happens? Well, rooted in family dynamics, societal expectations, or simply perfectionism. And I think a lot of us have been victim to especially that. More on that later. Discrimination or being the only one in the room obviously can amplify the above, and it often leads to overworking and I guess burnout in the worst case. And we talked about burnout on this show. So overworking or burnout to prove yourself and to think you have to work double, triple hard just to feel worthy enough. In this episode, I will unpack some of it, and I will share some of the tactics and strategies that have helped me over the years, as well as I have taught or have shared with others to help them. And I think I've seen how eventually they have been successful. So let's get into it. Managing imposter syndrome is the question for today. I'm breaking this down in 3 buckets. We will talk about cognitive strategies. Then I'll talk about behavioral strategies, and then we'll talk about long-term practices. It's in the long term where we start transforming ourselves and build eventually a runway that leads to ourselves being reconditioned into something, well, a better version of ourselves. First up, cognitive strategies. Reframe negative thoughts. When you catch yourself thinking, I don't belong, challenge it. What evidence do you have that you earned this? I'm sure there's some. Start looking around, start scraping this together. Why is it you? Right time, right person, right situation. But start challenging your own thoughts at this point. I think this is a muscle to build, and then continued a muscle to train, to not fall victim to the autopilot that the mind is on, as in like, okay, something good has happened and somehow it can't be because of me, because I don't belong here. This is absolutely not possible, right? So we're going to start challenging this, start finding evidence. Now, with that evidence, we eventually start building an achievement block, which is the second part here. We're going to record our wins. We're going to collect the positive feedback that we receive, right? Is it verbally? Is it written? Is it taking photos of things? And we record this as lessons learned. And reviewing this once in a while, when you feel it, when the demand of the hour asks for it, we are going to look into it. We're going to look at it And this helps to build a balanced self-view so that we are not a victim of listening to the voice in our head that says, you don't belong here, you don't earn it. Now, how to build an achievement log? Honestly, for me, it's simple as creating a folder in my photo app, taking screenshots from my phone, taking photos, recording voice notes. Yeah, I think they're called voice notes. And putting them in there and visiting this folder when there's a need. So it will give you that once in a while needed confidence boost. You can also do it right before you go into an important event. Imagine you have a presentation or whatever important conversation that you need to have. Look at this and remind yourself, no, it's me. It's me, and it's right that it's me, and I can do this. So again, build an achievement log, which can give you the needed confidence boost. The third part, set realistic standards. I mentioned earlier perfectionism. So distinguish between healthy striving and perfectionism. Aim for good enough on low stakes tasks. And I talked about this before in this podcast. I think when it comes to perfectionism, we as designers are completely ill-educated on what this means, right? Something being perfect is always contextual. Good enough is perfect for the right context. The moment context is changing, and it certainly will, the sort of perfect solution is no longer fitting and hence not perfect. So it goes back to low stakes tasks and when do I deploy what energy needed for what task or what problem to solve. So good enough is perfect for the right context. What this leads to, it manages your own expectations. It lowers the temperature around you and eventually inside you. And you're also avoiding burnout as there are missions and projects which require you to go all in. And for those you need this energy, rightfully so. And that there are missions that are just low stakes tasks. They just need to be done. They just sit at the back of something and they're just not uncommon. On the job, in an office, in a company, those appear all the time. And I've seen especially young designers going at these things with like, this is my absolute project. I'm going to go to Mars for this thing or Moon, depending where you want to go. And I see that people just invest far too much energy, time, and tension into things that are just absolutely not worth it, right? It takes a bit of time to learn this and to build this muscle, but I think it is hypercritical to be aware of this. When do I deploy what type of energy or how much for what type of problem? Okay, that brings us to the second bucket, behavioral strategies. I think sharing your feelings is something very important. So talk with a trusted mentor, a colleague, or a coach. Vocalizing doubts often reveals that you have far more common than you think. I mentioned before the kitchen cabinet. I'm a strong believer in this. Build your kitchen cabinet. I will link in the show notes to an episode in which I talked about the kitchen cabinet. Call the folks up that are in there, right? Different folks for different problems, different circumstances. Some are more for work, some are more for this job, some are for family life and other things. Kitchen cabinet can infinitely expand. So establish a peer group to exchange experiences and challenges, right? That helps you to not feel alone, getting tips, share experiences, share field notes, basically. And by that, it's like going out there. Here we also see again the power of being in an office and not working from home necessarily. But exchanging these experiences of like, hey, since 2 weeks I'm feeling like this about this problem or about this project. Can we just have coffee? I just need to vent eventually, right? Or share my perception here. And you might be surprised. The other side will say, you know what? I felt the same about this, or I didn't feel about this that way, but I felt about it here on the other end. So it will introduce a different perspective, maybe a nuanced perspective, or it just confirms what you're feeling. And if anything, it helps you to feel not alone, which in turn helps to contribute to that you are worthy. That brings us to the third point of behavioral strategies. Celebrate small wins. This sounds easy, but if you're in a hole, this is actually not that easy. So build positive momentum by acknowledging every step forward you have done. No achievement is too small, right? Did you receive a pat on the back? Did somebody say, oh, well done in that meeting just now? Or was it a major presentation? Maybe you convinced the client to sign for the next project, or you delivered the closing concept remarks or whatever, and it led to something big for everybody. No achievement is too small. We're going to celebrate it. Go and reward yourself, right? By yourself with the right intention, or maybe with others together, especially when it was a team effort. So that could be as easy as in like, I'm going to my favorite coffee shop and I have nice cup of coffee, preferably without your phone. Just sit there and enjoy the coffee. Be very intentional that this is about celebration. And that gets us to long-term practices. So the last bucket. In the long term, we build the runway to sustainable transformation. Once we take these habits and build them into something that rewires the brain and lets us sustain and change state. Adopt the growth mindset. I think this is becoming more than ever important, given that we're heading in the hyper-automated future of things. View skills and competence as developable. Just because you don't know something or you can't do something, either not at all or not as good, doesn't mean this can't change. So most things, can be learned and can be developed. Mistakes are opportunities to learn, not evidence for inadequacy. And I would think what also applies here is this perfection topic, or the trap of perfection. If you learn a new skill or a new tool, we're still living in an age where some tools have to be learned. That doesn't mean you should wait until you deploy and apply this tool until you think, I'm the master of the masters. Guess what? The masters of the masters moment is either never going to come or still a long way. And you may miss out on opportunities to learn from applying this tool, even if you're, again, just good enough. Watch out for the perfectionism trap. I think it's the easiest to fall in trap. Second, mentor or teach others. I think it is very empowering if you are able to explain concepts to peers and junior. That reinforces your expertise and reminds you that you actually know stuff and also how much you know. So mentor or teach others is, I think, a great tool to deepen in what you've learned and just give you confidence that you actually know stuff. Again, and also here, we don't have to wait until we know everything to start mentoring or sharing knowledge or explaining to others something. It could be just a little nugget that has to be shared, right? So again, perfectionism trap. We'll try to stay out of this trap. And then last but not least, the professional support. So if imposter feelings become overwhelming, consider talking to a therapist or a coach skilled in performance anxiety. Guess what? That exists. Of course it exists. So I think therapy to me is something that ideally one starts to engage in not after something has happened. A lot of people start therapy after some hardship that has occurred, right? And we need fixing. No, start working on this before you need to fix something. I think therapy is something that is meant to prevent the worst from happening. So engaging with a therapist, start interviewing therapists, start finding the right one if you feel you need one. And that can really help. And same as with coaches are not therapists and therapists are not coaches. There is a distinction here. But coaches can help to enable to work on transformation. I worked on and off with coaches, and with some coaches that works better, with some others it doesn't. You kind of have to find the right fit a little bit. But it is definitely a tool that's in the professional support corner, and it should be accessed when we feel there's a need. All right, that was it for managing imposter syndrome. This is a deep topic. We could go on forever on this, and maybe we'll make a second episode. Send in your comments and your experiences with this, how you eventually navigated this, managed it, worked yourself out of it. Still working on it. I'm curious to learn how you all are working on this. Again, I talked about cognitive strategies, reframe negative thoughts, keep an achievement log, set realistic standards. Then we talked about behavioral strategies, share your feelings, seek feedback regularly, celebrate small wins, super important. And then in the long term, where we build transformation, long-term practices, adopt the growth mindset. Again, more than ever important. Mentor or teach others, from nuggets to lessons, I guess, and seek professional support. I tell all my students that the earlier you start figuring out your emotional household and you start recognizing how much weight, how much importance it holds over your actions, reactions, and decisions, the earlier, the better. I hope this was helpful, and I'm looking forward to your comments and feedback. See you all in the next episode. Thank you for listening.